generally ask you to start with about your experience as a crime fighter in the city and what you've seen in your years here. How has crime evolved and how has crime enforced? I mean, what have you seen that's changed? Is it any different now than it was 21, 30 years ago?
Oh, it is. Let me know when you want me to start right
Go
now.
ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been a resident here in Baltimore for 22 years, and I haven't seen crime this bad. I mean, it's like a combat zone. You know, people are afraid to come in the city. Our judges, quite frankly, used to walk down to Inner Harbor to get lunch, something like that, but they pretty much all brown bag it now because, you know, of the crime. And, you know, when we're out and about, I mean, we have to be vigilant and be aware, but I think it's a combination of things. I think, for one thing, I think when you have low-level crimes not being prosecuted, they turn into high-level crimes, and people act with impunity, and these narcissistic guys, it's all about them. They're going to go out and carjack somebody, rob somebody, and when there's no consequences, right? And it takes forever and a day for the case to come to court. And then these perpetrators are out on bond. They're committing second and third crimes. And you have to make the crimes, the punishment commensurate with the serious crime and a violation. And if you don't take these violent offenders off the street and keep them in jail, they shouldn't be able to be out on bond for a gun crime. And I mean, gun crimes should be felonies. It shouldn't be a misdemeanor and, oh, the guy had a gun. And, you know, these are bad guys, bad people, and they're going to continue to do their dastardly deeds and commit these felonies and serious crimes. And that's why things are out of control. I mean, there's no accountability. Many times they're not prosecuted. If they are, they're given a very light sentence. I know Governor Hogan has put in many tough crime packages in his 7th or now going on his 8th year. And unfortunately, the General Assembly has passed very, very few of them. And the city delegation, a lot of times, they don't get behind the governor, and unfortunately, they make it a political thing instead of a public safety issue, and it should be a public safety issue, and they should be more caring about their constituents and the public than, well, this guy's a Republican and I'm a Democrat or whatever. I think there's too much squabbling and in-house fighting about that, and it's and then too many people try to separate us too on race or position, and you know, we're all the same more than we're different, in that we need to feel secure in our homes and when we're out and about, you know, and we need, as Martin Luther King said, I marched with Martin Luther King back in 1967. Spiro T. Agnew was our governor. So Dr. King was here in Baltimore and in D.C., and the governor at that time assigned a couple troopers because of some people threatening him. So he always, during his march for civil rights, he always based it on godly principles, no violence. And I'll give you a copy. I have a copy of his pledge back during the unrest with Freddie Gray and more recently George Floyd, when the protesters came around the courthouse and around Baltimore City, and then we had to go to Washington, D.C. when Bill Barr ordered us down there when they were defacing the statues and destroying property. I know I passed out 2,000 or 3,000 of these pledges, and it kind of lowered the temperature. You know, after the guys read that, it lowered the temperature, and they were surprised to hear that I had marched and walked with Dr. King. But he always said, no violence, no violence. We're marching for civil rights. And he always said it's the content of a person's character and ability, not the color of their skin. And I think too many people try to divide us on race or position, and we can't let that happen because we're all more alike than we're different, and that we need certain things like fellowship, love, affection, security. So anyway, that's my take on that.
And what portion of the problem are ghost guns responsible for?
Ghost guns, I think it's a small amount. I mean, ghost guns, I know the Attorney General, Brian Frosh, and they have a bill in, and I think they should be not allowed, obviously, because there's no way to trace them, and you can get them through mail orders and all that, and they're responsible for certain crimes, and they should be eliminated, but I think it would be very, very small amount, or it would help, but I think the ghost guns are, as far as all the homicides in the city last year, I think it was around 335, 338. In my estimation, and working with our fugitive task force, with the city police and the troopers, I think it was a small amount. Ghost guns for the crimes. Bad guys are always going to get their guns. I mean, you know, a lot of times some of the politicians, they blame the gun instead of the violent offender or the violent criminal. The guns don't shoot themselves. You know, you have to have trigger pullers, and the trigger pullers are the violent offenders, okay? And what we need to do is go after the violent offenders more than the gun itself, you know? Bad guys on the black market are always going to get their guns. They don't go through legitimate means to purchase a weapon, like a waiting period, like the average person that's going to keep a weapon for target practice, or keep one with a concealed carry permit for safety issues, safety reasons. But ghost guns, I would say, would be a help, but it's small in the overall crime picture of helping. You know, we need to get violent, repeat offenders off the street, and that's what we need to concentrate on. And stiffer penalties for these violent criminal offenders, like no bond, all felonies. That's what we need to look at, Jeff.
So it sounds like ghost guns are a rouge, or a kind of a diversion from the main problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's popular now. You see a lot about ghost guns in the media, national and state media, and they're a problem, yes, but I don't think if you eliminated all ghost guns, you're still going to have a big crime problem in these major cities, and that's because these guys are getting away with it. And I don't know what the closure rate is on homicides here in the city, but if, let's just say, every homicide was followed through and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and these guys were given life in prison, or, I mean, this is my personal opinion, I think when you take a life, I think when we had the death penalty, that was a big deterrent. And if guys knew they killed somebody, they were going to die, you know, from the death penalty, or they were going to get life in prison, that would be a big deterrent. But shooting somebody and pulling a gun on somebody, I mean, that's a major issue and a major crime, and it needs to be stopped. And the only way to stop it is to take these perpetrators off the street and give them long sentences. And unfortunately, that's not being done. There's too much plea bargaining and slap on the wrist and Johnny didn't get his lollipop when he grew up, you know, and that's what made him bad and stuff like that.
So if you were commissioner, then you wouldn't, the focus wouldn't be on ghost guns like the city's heavily focuses right now. It'd be on the courts and different.
Yeah, the violent repeat offenders. Yeah, like I say, these ghost guns are a problem, but the violent repeat offenders are a bigger problem. And some of the issues in the city, as I see it, I mean, you got these squeegee men and squeegee boys that intimidate a lot of people, and I've witnessed it myself. I mean, I usually talk to them, and, you know, I'll give them a devotional and $1 or something like that. And most of them, I'd say 70% of them are pretty decent kids. But you get about 30%, they'll kick your car, they'll throw a water bottle at your car, they'll pick up a rock and throw at your car. They intimidate people, they surround a car, and they shouldn't be out in the street. First of all, it's impeding traffic. Being a trooper for 30 years, under Article 66 and a half, you can't get out in the major thoroughfare and impede traffic like that. So it needs to be enforced. And then between the squeegee kids and, or men, I should say, because some of them I've seen, they have beards and everything else. Then you have these guys that ride these dirt bikes and motorcycles with impunity, doing wheelies, circling around cars, and they are an annoyance and a hazard. That needs to be enforced. So a lot of people, I have a house in Harford County, I have a house in the city, and a lot of people refuse to come into Baltimore City. Number one, because of the crime. Number two, the squeegee kids, the guys on dirt bikes, they've had bad experiences. And it's, quite frankly, it's really hurting the city economy and the owners of the restaurants. I get down to Little Italy once a week, and I know the restaurant owners are always complaining about this stuff. And I think it falls on deaf ears for the most part. I think the city leaders don't get it, you know, or if they do get it, they don't do anything about it. So, my opinion.
They want to find them jobs instead of jail. They want to, you know.
Yeah, and there's there's a lot of things you could do, Jeff, to enhance people's opportunity in the city. And a lot of it would be strengthening community bonds. And I think you do that, you get these officers out of car for an hour or two a day, you know, walking around, get them in the same area, the same neighborhood, let them meet the neighbors, go in for a cup of coffee, talk to the business owners. You know, you build up a lot of trust, and you can solve a lot of crime that way. You know, we used to do it in the state police in a lot of small towns. And you know, you work on those type things, and then you work on community policing through the police athletic leagues, open those back up, and you know, work with the kids on weekends and after school instead of letting them hang out on a street corner watching a drug dealer do his work out there and see his roll of money, you know.
So how do you characterize, like, if the city gets their ghost gun plan legislation through? I mean, do you think we're going to see any kind of impact on the crime here? I mean,
well, I think, let's face it, with criminals and crooks and bad guys, quite frankly, they're going to buy their guns through illegal means, whether it's a ghost gun or, you know, a 40 caliber Glock like I carry. There's plenty of guns out on the street, and you can try to curtail them. You got Pennsylvania up here, right up the road, it has different rules. Virginia has different rules. Delaware, District of Columbia. So guns are going to be continuing to come in. I know the troopers work interdiction up on 95, and they confiscate a lot of guns and a lot of drugs. But I think Governor Hogan's crime fighting package would stop a lot of this violent crime. And again, it's the gun doesn't shoot and kill people, it's the violent offender pulling the trigger. So we need to go after the violent offender, and he's going to have a gun, so you're getting him off the street, you're getting some of his guns and hardware off the street. But if you just make all this legislation about guns, I think it's going to take a little bite out of crime, but a very small bite out of crime. Yeah.
What have we left out?
Sir?
What have we left out? Anything else?
Well, I'd like to see no bond for gun crimes, and I'd like to see all gun crimes as felonies, and I'd like to see mandatory sentencing for violent repeat offenders. And I think with that, and I think that, like I say, Governor Hogan has stated many times when I've been with him that the city will never get control of violence if they can't get the violent criminals off the streets. And I think his violent firearms offenders bill that he put in this year, it would help the situation by getting these violent offenders off the street. I know we have a lot of task force operations, and we have state police, city police, county police, the sheriff's agencies, and when we arrest these guys, I know a lot of times the U.S. Attorney, Eric Barron, and his team will take a look at the charges. And if it meets certain criteria, they're going to charge the guy federally, the bad guy. And when he's charged federally, you know, he goes right to jail, he stays in jail, there's no bond. But I think, you know, when these guys get out on bond for a gun crime, before it goes to trial, and there's a lot of tactics, as you well know, to delay a trial. And with the COVID, a lot of trials have been getting delayed. And anyway, I think these bad guys are using that to their advantage, and they're continuing to commit new crimes when they haven't been really tried for the first crime because they're out on bond. So don't let them out on bond, send them to jail, keep them in jail.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It seems like they're doing nothing to
Yeah.
ease the panic or the, you know, the nerves of residents here. It just seems like the guy that got shot for the Little Italy restaurant manager. You know?
Yeah, he was a friend of mine.
Was he?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just seemed
Chesley
like-
Patterson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That incident, I think, really, you know, everything else you could blame on guns or gangs or their involvement
Yeah.
with this or that, but that was just seemed to be a
Yeah.
random act of violence.
Actually, Father Chuck, who was a chaplain for the Marshal service, and he takes care of all our federal prisoners, he and I go down to Little Italy. He lives in Little Italy. He lives right down at St. Vincent de Paul Church.
Oh, yeah.
And we were just down there at La Scala that evening.
Oh, wow.
And then we leave there, and we were talking to Chesley and Nino, the owner, and then we find out Chesley gets shot and killed right down there at Eastern Avenue and Broadway, you know, and terrible, just terrible. And then there was a priest that got beat up down there in Little Italy probably about 2 months ago, and he got carjacked, you know. And a friend of Father Chuck's, and Father Chuck was telling me, he said, boys, I'm a priest. And they said, we don't care. We want your money, your car, you know, and they beat him down. I thought, it's terrible. You know, these guys that do this type stuff, they have no regard for human life, and they're very narcissistic. And, you know, if you don't take them off the street and keep them locked up, they're going to get out and do it again because they see no consequences for their crime.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
Right. I know.
preaching to the choir.
I know. Well, it is frustrating. I can,
Yeah,
you know,
it is.
see
It
the
really
same
is. I
things
mean,
go around.
personally, I feel bad for these city police officers. I really do, because they need to get the backing of the leaders, the leadership, the city council, you know, the mayor, the police commissioner. you need to back your troops, and as long as they're acting in good faith. I mean, if you get a road cop, get him out of there, charge him, do what you got to do. But most of the police that I know in my 56 years, they're good, decent people, and they have feelings just like everybody else, and they want to help people. They don't want to hurt people. But I think they get dejected and get demoralized because they don't get backed a lot of times. Sometimes the police get handcuffed and they can't do their job, you know. But I think a couple things. I think if they got out of the cruisers, walked the beat for an hour or two a day, met their neighbors, you know, developed a lot of interaction, it would build trust in the community, and it would also help them solve some more crimes. Because if I know you, Jeff, and let's just say I live in a neighborhood and you're a cop and you're stopping in to talk to me and have a cup of coffee or whatever, you know, I'm going to be able to go to you and get some information. We're going to be able to help each other. Right. So I just think it builds up trust and it helps you solve a lot of crime. And like I say, not to beat a dead horse, but when I was in the state police, we used to do it in all the small towns because they didn't have city police. And man, you'd be surprised what you learn, you know, and it built up a lot of trust and community goodwill.
I wonder why they don't do that around here. You know,
I don't know. You know, I've mentioned it to Commissioner Harrison, and I don't know why, but to me, it would help. It would help the citizens of the city, and it would help the police department.
Right. It seems like every commissioner that comes in, they say that coming in, and they start for a few months, and then it kind of fades away.
Yeah.
And then they're back in the cars again.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, just to ride through a neighborhood in a cruiser, you know, it's that omni-police presence, but as soon as, you know, the cruiser's gone and the officer, these bad guys know about what time he's going to ride through again. But if he's parking a car and out of the car, walking around, seeing what's going on, you know, and taking some notes, these guys are going to move their operation to a different area.
You think the block is the bulk of the problem?
No, I don't think that is the bulk of the problem at all. And like I say, I don't go to the block unless I get down to police headquarters. I've never been in one of those establishments. But quite frankly, being a city resident, I don't see too much crime going on down in that area. There's plenty of other areas where there's a lot more crime going on. So I don't know who came up with that idea.
I can't remember ever covering anything down on the block, like crime-wise, you know, ever.
Yeah.
It's all just petty stuff, it seems like.
Yeah.
I guess they have to have somebody to blame.
I think, I don't know, people get tied up in their own little ideas about something, and sometimes, as you can say, certain people look up at the stars but can't see the light. You know what I mean? Can't see the forest for the trees. So you need to talk about things and talk things out and talk to groups of people before you just arbitrarily and capricious go in and make a new regulation.
And ruin people's lives.
Yeah, it's, you know, there's a lot of other things can be done. So